well, I was sick for a few years before I discovered what to do. And it was one of the guys I did marathons with. He said to me, have you ever done the bulletproof coffee? And I said, I don't even know what you're talking about. And so he sent me the thing, and I thought, okay, I've tried everything else. I couldn't use the medicine. So I was going through these on my own with no drugs.
If you've been watching, you know that I take my ingredients very seriously, but there are 3 companies that I have found that I absolutely love. Check the description for discount codes. Hello, welcome to my show. My name is Adrienne. This is a series where I interview different people who've inspired me to live a healthier life. Today, I have my friend Linda. She has a master's in nutrition and wellness. She's a certified holistic nutritionist and certified in NASM as a senior fitness specialist. And she's currently working for Dr. Rimka, as well as being a wellness blogger and so many things. So, thank you so much for being here, Linda.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. It's so nice to meet you in real life and now again here on the video.
When I met you, you told me this super inspiring story of healing yourself and your family and how you found your way to carnivore. So I'm wondering if you could tell that to my audience.
Yeah, it started a long time ago. It's 2024 now, and I haven't had a migraine in 8 years. Before that, I rarely had a time without one. And like one would end right when the next one was starting. So it was just like one after another rolling, and they roll on and on. And I'd have these little short breaks from now and then, and I'd think, is this it? But no. And we don't really know what was going on. I never really could get a proper diagnosis on it, but we did know that there was brain inflammation. In hindsight, we know that it was just a lot of brain inflammation. And I was misdiagnosed. We lived in a moldy house, but I was misdiagnosed by my doctor, and he put me on antidepressants. And those did work really, really well at first until they don't. And I think you and I discussed this once, how, we might use a supplement and it works really, really well until it doesn't, because that wasn't what your body needed. And so that's what happened to me. But every time I'd go back to the doctor, he would tell me that I was doing everything right and that this was normal. And then he'd adjust my dose. And I was a good patient. I followed all of the rules, and I would leave still feeling like crap. But, anyway, I was a really good rule follower back then. I did everything the doctor told me. I followed the food pyramid. I ate a lot of vegetarian meals because that was what we were told was good. It was very high carb. I did marathons back then and a lot of fitness classes. So, you do eat a high carb food or high carby when you're marathoning. You've probably heard of that, where you eat the bagels and the pasta the day before, and then afterwards you're eating bananas and chocolate milk. And I'm sure you know stories.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, well, it was, and I also had a really amazing career, and I loved it. I had a very active social life, and I honestly don't know how I juggled it all. And I pretty much still don't, but I did it all on very little sleep because the antidepressants just kind of kept me at this buzz all the time. I didn't sleep well. My body just really did. I said buzz, but it was kind of like this nervous feeling all the time inside, just like this. And I'm still living in the moldy house. So but my life before the moldy houses, I had a really normal life. I was a mom first. I was the room mom for my kids' school. I did brownies and Boy Scouts and 4-H with the kids. We did crafts, you name it. I was part of the ladies group at church. I volunteered for my husband's military, so we volunteered for everything on base. I did crafts, made jewelry. We hiked, we kayaked, every place we moved, we just explore and just do it all. And if you wanted to do something like I was your girl, let's go. And kind of like hanging out in Chicago when it was just like we were constantly going. It was so much fun. And that's how life was before. And I loved it. But also back to diet on that too. We thought we were eating healthy. We were eating, the food pyramid, but we didn't have like Cheetos and Twinkies or soda or stuff like that in the house. We were eating whole foods, and I was cooking. It we were eating really well for the way that we were taught. And I didn't have a degree in nutrition then. I had a business degree, so I didn't know. Anyway, we did end up moving to Oregon when my husband retired from the military, and that's when we moved into the moldy house. And there were a lot of new stressors other than the moldy house because one, he just retired from the military. Two, we now all of a sudden had a lot of family around us, and we weren't used to that, like right next door around us. And we were in civilians now and not in a military community. And that's a whole different life. I don't know if you've been around military people, but we're different. Um, but uh, I just remember when we were living there, it's just like these stressors and just something didn't feel right in me. And I didn't know about mold. I honestly didn't. And I would just find myself sobbing. I'd find myself, you know, fearful, like foreboding. Is that a good word? Just this foreboding fear of something, this anxiety. And that was new to me. I had not had that before. I was unaware of mold illness or problems with moldy houses. I mean, I knew there was mold. I could see it. We did the bleach. Don't do that. Don't do that. We did, what normal people would do when they see mold. And I also was unaware of the drug culture of doctors at the time. I listened to everything my doctor said. If he said to do it, I did it. I was a good patient. So, anyway, we did end up moving out of that house and things did start getting better. But by then, I was always already on those antidepressants. And I was just going like this Energizer bunny with all that going on. So it's kind of like everything kind of stacked, the moldy house. And then he put me on the antidepressants while I was there. And so that was all kind of coupled. We get out of the mold, but I still got this other thing going on. And it was just this horrible inner tension and lack of sleep. I could barely sleep. I was sleeping 3 hours a night. And it was just not a good situation at all. And it wasn't too long before pretty soon my body just crashed and I couldn't handle it anymore. And yeah. And so I was in that place. I had to leave my job. I couldn't think straight I couldn't do my work. I, but I don't know. I mean, you've been mold poisoned, you know how it can be. It's just like you can't function. But I also had, this medication going too that my body didn't need. And so that was all going on. I remember seeing my body tremble. I could look down when I would, stand or sometimes, and I could look down and see my body just trembling. It was just this anxiety.
Yes.
Do you know
Would
that
you
feeling?
say that fear, I call it terror. Like, and for me, it would come on at night, and I would just hold my babies because my terror was that they were gonna just die. It was incredibly irrational, and I would call it intrusive thoughts, and it's so crazy because everybody would say I needed psych medicine, but then I leave the moldy house and that all went away. So I
Yeah.
didn't psych medicine. It was the mold causing this brain inflammation.
It definitely, that's exactly what it is. I called it foreboding, but it was too, it's just like any second something was going to happen. And you just kind of always felt it. It was any second, any second. And the thing is that as a rational person, I could see or feel, or I knew that that wasn't okay. And like I said, I find myself just sobbing because
Mhm,
you don't know what to do. How do you fix this? So, what my temperament is that when something isn't right, you work a little bit harder, you get up earlier, you get up earlier, you work harder, and that you just bull your way through whatever. That's the way I was raised. You make it happen, you work. And
mhm,
so that doesn't actually help in this situation, uh, just to let you know. It doesn't help.
mhm.
And but anyway, I ended up when my body crashed, I just couldn't do anymore. And I remember the day I walked into work and I walked up to my boss and I said, "We got to talk. I can't do this." I hadn't even talked to my husband. I said, "I just can't do this anymore. Can we put me in for like a medical retirement or something? I can't do this." And so I left and I got home and kind of just fell into my chair. The fatigue, there was just like this horrible fatigue. And my legs felt like they were made out of wood almost. It was just awful. And then these migraines they were kind of just coming and crashing and then going away and crashing and going away. And I remember at work one day that I actually felt better at work. with when I had the migraines because I could just put on blinders and just be like this and nobody would bother me. And but at home, we had in-laws living right next door that needed a lot of help, and we had everything going on. So it was almost easier to be at work where I could just cave in because I didn't have that luxury at home to, shut myself into a room. So when I did get out of my job, I just pretty much lived in my chair. I kind of skipped a part there. I forgot. I had a lot of sensitivity. I was never allergic to anything. Anything. I never had seasonal allergies. I was always really healthy. Rarely got anything. Then all of a sudden, when this all was going on, I started finding myself allergic to things. It was just weird. First thing I noticed was I was allergic to sweeteners, artificial sweeteners. And the list just kind of started growing and growing. And it was just uncanny. So by the time I ended up just crashed, and I say crashed, but I was just collapsed actually. And I pretty much lived in my recliner with a barf bucket because I never knew when something wasn't going to stay down. And I was limited to only like 3 foods well, including butter. I could have butter, but it was 3 foods that I could have and not react to, oddly. And, yeah, it was just not good. So,
Yeah, I suddenly got sick every time I ate, and I tried to eliminate and eliminate and eliminate everything that was making me sick, but it turned out in the end there was nothing I could eat without being sick. And I didn't know because I thought it was bad, so I didn't even try beef.
it's true. It's true. Actually, it's kind of interesting now that you just said that. I remember when the migraines first kind of started when we were in the moldy house, and my son was still living at home. He had just started college, and I remembered somebody saying, or I read it somewhere because this was back like in we moved there in 2000, so this is like 2005, and I remember somebody saying that red meat had an amino acid that would help migraines. And I just remembered somebody saying that one time. And so because I was starting to get the migraines slowly when we were in the moldy house, but they just kept building and building. And then they got to the place where, you know, anyway, they were, when it got to the place where they just didn't break at all. And so my son actually went to the store and got a little pack of steaks and cooked them up, and we sat there and ate steaks. And they were like these paper thin because we didn't want too much red meat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um,
So
did you ever have issues driving?
yes.
'Cause I couldn't drive. I would, within 10 minutes of driving, I would start getting incredibly sleepy and would be turning the air on and opening the windows and blasting the music and getting up and pulling over and doing jumping jacks, and it turned out the inflammation was so big, I guess, that the fluids and the everything was not circulating to my brain when I was trying to drive.
Yeah, I was really sensitive to everything. So, like, I could watch something sometimes. Other times, I would have to listen to because I would listen when I was
Mhm.
trying to get well. I would have to listen to things, but I would actually have a little barf bucket with me because I would throw up when I was. So I couldn't keep food down very easily. So,
Oh, and then I would be concentrating so hard, but the brain fog was pretty bad. And it would like everything was oversensitizing. So like a car coming up next to me to just kind of drive around was like too much for my sensory system. So
it's true.
every driving experience was exhausting.
No, I remember one day I thought if I could just get out of the house, I would feel better. So I get in my car and I get down to the corner and I would just think, can't do this. And I would just go around the block and go back home. And all I was going
Yes.
to do was go to the library. They had these big comfy chairs. I figured I'd just sit there in the library, pretend to read, and just be out. And, I can't
Yes.
tell you how many times I would drive down to that corner and I would just make a turn and go around the block and go home.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, it's just it's just too much, and especially going into a store, think about, like, going into Target or
Yes. It
Costco
was
with
so
all
overstimulating.
the flickery lights, and that's one thing I still notice, as a recovering I don't know what you call somebody that used to get migraines, there's probably a word, recovering migrainer or something, whatever, but I was very sensitive to light and flicker. So, like there was a TV commercial and they were showing how the light had a strobe, and at the second I would hear that TV commercial on, I would die, get into another room, turn the TV off, get a pillow, something to get, don't let me see that strobe. And so I walk into, like, my mom's church has these horrid lights that flicker. And I would tell her, I said, Mom, I can't be in here. These lights flicker. And she goes, they don't flicker. So one time I just did my video, and and then that's all I did. And then I told her, and she said, these lights don't flicker, just stop. And I showed her the video. She goes, these lights flicker. And it's like, yes. And I can
Yes.
feel that, and I can see, nowadays I'm much more resilient. I can be in a room and go, oh, look, the lights are flickering. No big deal. And like we talked about color, how
Mhm.
sometimes wearing a bright color is just too stimulating. So I wear darker colors most of the time, um, just because it's easier. When you wear a bright color, like if I was wearing, bright green, that's a lot more stimulation to deal with. And so I still actually gravitate to the darker colors just because it's less noise to deal with. But I don't really have problems with it like I did. And I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, she was telling me her story. And I said, I had that too. I totally forgot. She said, how do you handle it? And it's like, you become resilient. You do get out of this. And as you keep going, you can't just say, oh, I'm well now, I guess I can go back to doing what I was before. No, you get out of
Mhm.
that and you keep going. So even after the migraines cleared, and it did take 2 years, it took 2 years of me. Well, I was sick for a few years before I discovered what to do. And it was one of the guys I did marathons with. He said to me, have you ever done the bulletproof coffee? And I said, I don't even know what you're talking about. And so he sent me the thing, and I thought, okay, I've tried everything else. I couldn't use the medicine. So I was going through these on my own with no drugs.
Wait,
So
how come you couldn't use the medicine?
was allergic to them too, or they just didn't work. I mean, that was one of the things. They would give you a medicine, it didn't work, or you would get these horrid side effects and they would give you another medicine. And I remember one day I finally just said, I'm not doing this. I was reacting very negatively to these medicines. And that was the only thing. He actually, the last time I saw my doctor, he gave me I refused to take the medicines, and he would not treat me for anything else unless I took the drugs. And he handed me a piece of paper, and there were 6 or 8 drugs on it. He said, these are the ones that I can give you. You go home, read about them, pick out the ones you want, and I'll write you some prescription for them. What? That's not how this works. So I never saw him again after that. No.
Did you say one time though that I mean, like, the reactions were so bad one time you ended up in the hospital? I
I
mean,
did.
these weren't like you weren't being
Oh,
just you're
no,
a
I ended
person
up
who
in,
listens to the doctors and tries what they're doing, but you ended up in the hospital.
and they still wanted to prescribe the same medicine to me. So I ended up, my daughter has told me more of the story. I don't remember a lot of it because I was in an ambulance, but apparently they had to, I don't remember, epinephrine or something. They had to
An
shoot
EpiPen.
something into my chest. And apparently I didn't react well to that. I apparently screamed. I don't remember. And
You would scream.
yeah, well, wasn't there. But my tongue
Mhm.
swelled up and my eyes were bright red. And I just remember I knew something was wrong. But yeah, it's crazy what's going on. But I don't know. I'm not a
So,
doctor and I don't play one on TV, so I don't understand. So
I just one of the thoughts that's going through my head is all the times I went in and they ran vague blood work and told me I was fine and sent me home. And so I would tell myself, this must be in my head. I just have to think my way out of this. And that's how it festered so bad because they weren't helping. And I was trying to convince myself it wasn't real because they told me it wasn't real. Did you have that too? But I mean, obviously, migraines, you can't think your
yeah.
way out of those.
No, I don't remember ever being told that, by my doctor that it wasn't real, but I was told that I would never this was my life from now on. I would, once this happens to you, this is gonna be chronic for the rest of your life, and you're gonna be on these medicines for the rest of your life. And I don't know how people live on the medicines. I honestly don't. They you lose your personality. All your joy gets jumped down to here. It's yeah, it's just it was awful. But I guess if I don't know, I to me it was better to not use any drugs, to live with the pain, and then to figure something else out. And that's what I did.
So you can't take the prescriptions, you're still not feeling well, but you gotta get better. So what did you do? So you
Well,
start with this bulletproof coffee.
yes, I did. So my son is a very he thinks so. He's a smart man and he thinks really well. And one day he said to me, if somebody suggests something to you, buy the best one that you can and do it that way. So like don't buy some store brand and say, I'm gonna see if it works and just try a little bit. No, you do it well so that you can say, yeah, this works or doesn't. So I was told about bulletproof coffee. This was long before Dave Asprey, he was still working a regular job. He just had a little blog. There was no bulletproof diet book. So this was a long time ago. There was no Facebook group with bulletproof in it. And so I bought the coffee and the brain octane oil, and I did it exactly by the recipe that he said. And I knew it was like from the early days of me doing this, I could tell something was changing. And there was just a little less of the edge on all the nervous and the foreboding. All of that just kind of took it down just a notch. And um, that just kept going on. So I started listening and studying and reading when I could and implementing things that he said. Now, everything was in a blog and in these chat rooms in the back of his webpage. And so I just would study and ask questions. And that's partially why I do what I do now. I do a lot for free online because all these people help me for free. And it's like, got to pay it forward because I'm well because of strangers on the internet answering my questions and helping me. So I did end up going on to a therapeutic ketogenic diet. And can I pause and say something here? When I say ketogenic diet, I hear people will go on, that's the worst thing. And my doctor said, and blah, blah, blah. Yes, the keto diet that everybody knows about, the fad keto diet, is not a healthy diet. The therapeutic ketogenic diet that they've been using for decades is a very healthy diet. They use it for all kinds of healing of brain health and epilepsy and dementia and all kinds of things they use it for to help with patients. And so that is a healthy diet. And so there's a huge difference when people say a ketogenic diet versus the fad keto diet. And I would like to say that just
Dr. Boz versus Kellogg's, right?
you got it. You got it. And I'm sure Dr. Berry would agree with me and Maria Emmerich would agree with me. And, because it's just, I
Yes.
hear it all the time. And, keto's the worst thing you can do. And it's like, well, it depends on which one you're talking about.
And
And
the
anyway, it
real
was on,
keto is a animal-based, animal fat and MCT diet, right? Or what is it?
yes. It wasn't as much animal. I mean, it was animal based, but it wasn't as much protein. It was a lot of very low starch vegetables. I wasn't eating fruit at the time because I couldn't handle high glycemic anything. I noticed that anything that might cause a high glycemic spike in me was just not a good thing. So I ate beef and mainly I ate beef and broccoli the most. I ate sweet potatoes because I could. They stayed down. That was important. And I don't eat sweet potatoes now very often. My son-in-law makes them, and I love when my son-in-law cooks for me, and I will eat anything he puts in front of me. And I can eat sweet potatoes now and then, and I'm great. But yeah, I'm still kind of careful about foods all these years later, but not like I once was. But yeah, it's very high fat. Ate a lot of butter, a lot of tallow, beef. I ate beef, mostly beef. I had broccoli, like cauliflower rice a lot. I really didn't eat a lot of foods though. And you just make sure that your fats are 75% of your diet and you're good to go. So the rest of my diet was divided between protein and carbs. Very little carb though is like maybe 15 to 20 grams of carbs because vegetables don't have that many carbs, but above ground vegetables, not, so I would eat asparagus sometimes. Actually, during that time was the first time I actually learned to love Brussels sprouts. I never liked them before. But yeah,
So
it's really
interesting
good.
because so many of the plants that you're saying are on the list for people who have autoimmune illness to avoid,
Mhm.
like Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli,
I don't eat them
and then
now very often.
sweet potatoes are full of oxalates.
Mhm.
So that's
But
funny,
they
but
say the
it
thing
helps
is
you heal to
well,
have 10 little bits of it as well as the high fat and some protein.
I think what it was too is like I wasn't able to keep down a lot of foods. So what
Mhm.
foods were going to stay down? And sweet potatoes would stay down. There were sometimes that was the only thing I could eat. My husband would make me a little bit of sweet potato and I would eat that. And I always put, I know that people are going to cringe, but I would just put butter on it and I would have butter and sweet potato. But
The
that
fat
was
and the
me.
carb, that sounds amazing.
I was gonna say, but that was actually while I was before I actually learned about being a ketogenic person, I was figuring out what foods I could eat, and that's what we'd figured out. So when I went into a ketogenic diet, I actually did keep the sweet potatoes, but not nearly as much. So what I did is I followed Dave Asprey's plan, the bulletproof diet, what ended up being the bulletproof diet book. I followed it to the letter. I mean, like to the letter. I did not veer off that at all. And I stayed on that, the early part of that diet for 4 years. And then on one day a week, he would have you take a break and eat some carbs, and I would have a serving of sweet potatoes. So that's how I did it. But I never cheated on the diet. I never had sweeteners. I didn't eat fruits. I didn't eat anything that was high glycemic. I didn't have any keto treats or any of those things. Fat bombs I don't think were invented yet.
I think we can both agree though, sweet potatoes, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, all of that is far better than keto bread from Walmart.
100%. And any of the bars that now say keto, I mean, Snicker bars
Mhm.
a lot of times are healthier than the fancy dancy healthy bars. So it's just, yeah, you've really got to watch what's going on anymore. I guess I was lucky too. Because of what happened to me and I was so limited in foods, I never really went through the carb flu. I've never had sugar withdrawals, or I probably did. I was dealing with
Oh,
something,
because you
so
were
I
just so
didn't notice.
sick anyway.
Yeah, I didn't notice if I went through any of that. And so I deal with people now that are struggling with, sugar withdrawal, and it's like, how did you deal with that? And it's like, I don't know. I didn't have it. And
You weren't really eating much before. I mean, I'm sure you know, with the throwing up and stuff. So you
yeah,
go on this Asprey diet, the bulletproof diet, and you do this for like 4 years. And in that 4 years, what happened? Like, did you just feel better one day? Was it a slow better, or how did
it
it
was a
go?
slow bit. It was like, the migraine started getting less long. So they would happen, and then before about the time this one was ending, the next one would start. So I would just be coming out of one, and I could feel the next one rising. It was just like this rolling tide. You've heard of rolling fat, what they call them, rolling 48s for fasters. People
Mhm.
do that. These were just rolling migraines, one after another. And when I would finally come out, I would just feel bruised. My head would be just bruised, and I would just, I mean, I even walked, you can see pictures of me back then. I kind of just like fearful of the next one coming. And they always did. But they would get a little less long, a little less intense. And so that was happening. And I could tell, but I also had more energy. So the fatigue was leaving and the anxiety was kind of going and coming and going. It was waving back and forth. But I had a little bit of inclination to, try walking. That didn't work really well at first. I got myself a vibe plate and I would just get on that, stand on that. And if I couldn't really, sometimes I would have to hold on to a chair and just stand on that. Since I didn't trust myself to go for a walk and go away from the house. And so I did that. I would just squat on it. I still have one of the best squats ever because I used to just squat for the longest time on my vibe plate.
And what
So
is
I
a
was getting
vibe plate for? How does that help you?
Well, Vibe you stand on it and it beats 30 hertz per second or 30 whatever that terms are, 30 of those a second. And so it's as if you're actually running and your feet are hitting the ground 30 times a second instead of, you're just standing there. So you're getting the impact of walking as your feet hitting the ground, but you're not. And it helps with lymph as if I was walking. And it helps with I still use it. If you watch any of my fitness videos, I'm still on it. I was on it yesterday. It helps with balance and the ligaments. And like, if you just hold a plank on it, it works you 10 to, it's like you're doing the plank, but I don't know. It's really just a really great thing. I love it. And it just kept me from I was sedentary, and this kept me from being too sedentary. So it was something to do, and I had the energy. I was starting to get the energy to do that. But the last migraine that hit lasted, it was 2 years into my diet, my new diet, and almost exactly 2 years. Started in July, and this was like the end of June timeframe that this happened, and it lasted 8 weeks. And it just kept going and going. And I actually thought, what did I do? What was I doing? I was reviewing everything. I must have screwed up somewhere. And
Hmm.
but when it broke, and I didn't know another one wasn't coming, it was several weeks before it was like, I haven't gotten another migraine, And it was just I was still waiting for the next one to come. And it took me a while before I realized, hey, there's not another migraine. And so it wasn't like when I did get well, I didn't know it for months. I would still crawl into bed every night and pray for God to heal me. And he had, but I didn't know it. So, anyway, I still think about that when I crawl in bed. It's like all these answers to prayer all these years. It's just been wonderful. But yeah, that one, oh, the one thing is that during this time, I was so food phobic. Like, I
Hmm.
wouldn't eat if somebody else prepared the food. It- yeah, because they might put something in there that was going to cause a migraine. And you just get so food phobic. You carry food with you. You're afraid to eat anything that's been in the refrigerator for a day because of
Yeah.
histamine, whatever,
Hmm.
and that leaves you too, by the way, that goes away. And all the, like, the anxiety about it all, the food phobia goes away, the foreboding goes away. It all goes away. But it takes time. And, people, I'm talking 2 years of me eating the same foods, the same diet, taking my ketones, doing my little carb thing 1 day a week, you know, 2 years. But yeah, it works. But you just, a friend said to me one day, don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle. And I kept thinking, I must be in the 5 minutes. And I never knew, but I just kept thinking this, I'm in the 5 minutes, the miracle's coming. So, and it did.
Amazing. So along the way, so for me, like I'm doing the shoemaker protocol to try to detox out this mold stuff. Did you have to do any protocols or was it just the diet?
I did. My journey was really haphazard because I didn't know, and we didn't have this community to talk about it all. So I learned things, little bits and pieces here, and then now in hindsight, I can see, oh, this is what was going on, but I didn't know at the time. So I did find supplements that helped me a lot, and I'd like to share those. So if you're listening and you have migraines, or even get chronic headaches, write this down. The supplements that really work are the herbs feverfew and butterbur, and that either one of those works, but together the synergy of those two is wonderful. If you toss in magnesium malate, you're going to even have a better result. So, and the reason magnesium malate, the malate molecule is it helps with ATP, which helps with energy, but it's also anti-inflammatory. So you kind of want that. You hear all the other magnesium uh, types like glycinate and citrate and all the others being talked about a lot. But the magnesium malate really deserves a lot of respect, especially if you're a migraine person, because it is anti-inflammatory and it does help with energy with ATP. So that's something that you really want. And so feverfew, butterbur, either one of those, but better together. And then the migraine malate or magnesium malate. And then the fourth thing I figured out later was riboflavin. And I didn't know about this till I was at a conference, and Chris Masterjohn, he wasn't at the conference, but somebody referenced him, and I immediately went back to my room and Googled this. On his website, he talks about riboflavin and migraines. So if you go to Chris Masterjohn's website, type that in. He's got a wonderful, it's a short little article about that. And riboflavin is very effective in migraines. And so that's what I put together on my own. And I have a story about this. So that's what I figured out. And that's what I was using. And so my daughter is a nurse practitioner, and she was working in a clinic, when she was still in school. And she was working in a clinic, and she called me one day and she goes, "How did you know?" And I said, "How did I know what?" And she said, "How did you know about?" And she listed the four things I just said. And she said, "That's what they use here for the migraines." And so, and it was just one of the doctors was using a combination of those herbs and she said, "But how did you know?" And I said, "I just figured it out. I listened and tried things and figured it out." So it was kind of nice to know to get, and I don't know what clinic she was at or what clinical she was in or what was going on, but I just remember her calling. She goes, "How did you know?"
That's amazing though that some doctor's office out there is doing this as well because that's not what they gave you when you went in for help.
No, but the lady that was a friend of my daughter's did hair, and I went to her after the migraines were over. I went to her just before we were leaving that area, and she got migraines. She was telling me about her migraines because people see me and say, "Hey, that was me." And she goes in the first time she goes in and said she had a migraine. They immediately sent her in for scans and did all these things. I never got anything but drugs, nothing but drugs. And I never got a scan. I never saw a neurologist. I never got poked or prodded or talked to or nothing. Just here's a prescription. Go home and be a good person. That was it.
So when did you get off the things for the anxiety and the mental health stuff?
Well, one, I didn't need those, but
Right?
I was, yeah. When I was sitting in the chair one day, I remember, I don't remember if I heard something or whatever, but it was just like, I'm not taking any more drugs. I'm just not. And so what I knew better than to go cold turkey, and I didn't trust my doctor at this point. So what I did is I cut them in half and in quarters. And so I took three-quarters of a dose for a little while, and then I took half a dose for a little while, and then a quarter of a dose for a little while, and then I quit. But don't do that. You need to talk to your doctor, do it the right way. I just didn't have a doctor I could trust at the time. So I refuse to use drugs unless I'm in the hospital, going to die. I'm going to do any lifestyle intervention before I will take a medication,
So you're
always.
2 years in, you get your last migraine, but you don't know, so you just keep doing the same protocol for 4 years just to make sure you're good. Is that right? And you get to start moving again, and, like, then what happened?
Well, I stayed on the diet because I didn't know how not to eat that. No, so I know what I was going to say earlier and couldn't remember. Dave Asprey's got, he calls it a roadmap. And I love this roadmap, even as a master's degree. I have a master's degree in nutrition. I still love this. He talks about food in the green zone, yellow zone, and red zone. The red zone foods, I'll bet you can name every one of them. Seed oils, all of those things that we know not to eat. But the yellow zone are foods that some people can eat and other people's can't. It's like some people can't eat peppers very well. Other people, no problem whatsoever. And so there's those foods are yellow zone. You need to try them and see if they work for you. I was afraid to try any of the yellow zone foods. I only ate out of the green zone. If their food was up there, I knew it was safe. And so I would eat it. That's how, I mean, I was so afraid of getting sick again. So it was not that I was afraid of, or just trying to make sure. I just didn't know how to eat outside of that. I didn't know how to expand it. And it just took time. But about 18 months after the last migraine, I was driving home and I realized I was just flabby because before this I was doing marathons and I was in boot camp classes and just, I love to go and do and swim and you name it, we did it. And I was just tired of feeling like a fragile, frail lump, because I would get winded walking to the mailbox. And, I don't know how
Yeah.
you walk like you do, because when I was that sick, it was really hard to just do anything. So
For some
I,
reason, I can put one step in front of the other, but even to this day, even though I've been healing, when I do laundry, I get sick. Am I, like, allergic to laundry maybe? But,
I don't know
I don't know, like, doing the day-to-day stuff I find exhausting, but for some reason, walking energizes me.
well,
I
that
don't know,
makes
maybe
sense.
it's
So
the lymphatic movement, I need to get myself a vibration plate.
you would love it. Also, though, you have little kids at home. By this time, I was an empty nester. So I think it's much, my mother in law used to say this, it's much easier to be brave for someone. So it's true. When you have little kids
Mhm.
around, you can do a lot more than, than when you
They
don't, I
have
think
to.
sometimes.
They're
So,
not gonna let me sit in bed, they'll come and jump on my head.
yes, right. And I did not have anybody to jump on my head.
So you've lost some muscle mass, you have
Lots
been in a chair, and
of-
you decide,
I'm going to do a Spartan, which is a big, I used to do obstacle course races too. And at first I thought I'm going to go back to marathoning because I know endurance racing. I'm an excellent endurance athlete, or I used to be. And I thought I'm going to go back and do that. And then I thought, no, the last thing I want to do is something that's going to be stressful. I want muscle. I need to build muscle. Plus, at this time, I was, in my 50s. And so I needed to build muscle, and I knew that. And so instead of doing uh, endurance races, I thought I would do a Spartan, which is an obstacle course race. So I didn't think about it. I came home, I announced it to the world first, signed up for the Spartan. 6 months out, I gave myself only 6 months to train for it. And then I signed up for CrossFit, and I also hired a weightlifting coach. And then I called my acupuncturist and told him, I'm going to need you on call because this is what I'm doing. And then I put my focus in that direction. And that's all I did for 6 months. And then I did a Spartan race as my comeback. The medal's hanging right there. I have it hanging right there. That was my comeback. And
oh,
I
did
used
you just
my
cry?
I did, and I still have the picture. It was so fun. I have a heartwarming story too, because I didn't want to do it alone, and I've done several races alone. I actually, this is how crazy I was before. I did back-to-back marathons one weekend, and I've done several races alone. So it wasn't unusual, but this is my first one back, and so I've tried to talk a few people into doing it with me, and it's like, just get your guts, girl, and do it. So my husband signed up to do it, and so he was training on his own, and I was doing my thing, very social. So I had to do it with a group. And so when the race started, it was cold. We were in Seattle in April. It was cold and the mud was so deep and it was misty, rainy, and we were freezing. And the thing went off and everybody took off running. And my husband turns around and puts his hand out. He grabbed my hand and we held hands and ran the race. And as long as we could. And then when we got to places, he would do it and then I would do it. And it was just so fun. And then we jumped the fire pit together. So
You
holding
did the
hands.
whole thing together?
Yeah.
Oh, he must have been so happy to get his wife back.
I think so. I don't, we don't talk about those dark years often. Every so often I do, just because it's like there was this life and then these horrible years and then this person now. I'm not the same person at all, but it's
In
been,
our house, "sirs" is a swear word.
yeah.
We
Oh, you
moved
asked about
5
protocols.
times, and my husband had to leave the work he was doing and get different work because I needed him to come closer because he was on the road full time, and, I needed to start paying for help with the kids because I was really struggling. We had to start paying for medical bills out of pocket because the doctors at only specialized doctors will treat this, and yeah, so "sirs" is a swear word, but he's also happy to get his wife back.
Yeah. It was
So, you
wonderful.
complete the Spartan and you're like, "But that's not all. I think I'm
No.
gonna get a master's degree."
Oh, that was a little later, but yeah, so I continued to weight lift. There is a little other thing. When I first started CrossFit, I was still feeling timid because I couldn't do any of it. I really couldn't do any of it. And but I showed up every day. And one day the coach walked up to me, and if Coach Andrew is listening, thank you for this. He said to me, "What are you eating?" And I told him what I ate. And so that's also a big point is I decided if I'm going to put on muscle, I needed to go carnivore. They didn't call it carnivore back then either. They were still calling it zero carb. And so it was zero carb diet. I don't know if Dr. Baker was around yet. I don't know. Anyway, they was calling zero carb. And I remember when I first heard about it, I thought, that's not good. And so I started doing the carnivore diet then. And so the coach said to me, "What are you eating?" And I told him, and he said, "Linda, You're an athlete now. You need to eat like an athlete. And I just remember thinking, I am an athlete now. And so everything I did, it was like, I'm an athlete now. I dress like an athlete. I think like an athlete. I eat like an athlete. I just, that mindset of I'm an athlete now. And it just changed everything. That was my entire focus was I'm an athlete now. And so I was doing CrossFit and weightlifting. And then when after the Spartan, I eventually dropped out of CrossFit. And then I just focused on weightlifting and building muscle because I needed that back. I did use a lot of other modalities. I did mention my acupuncturist. I did not use him during the migraines very often, but I did use him a lot after the migraines were over and getting my body back with the muscle and all the different things because it takes a while to do that. And I just needed all the help I could get. But I used a lot of red light, especially right here on the back of my neck and yeah, right in there, upper shoulders, back of my neck, back of my head. A lot of red light therapy with the migraines. I did the vibration plate. I did infrared sauna if I could tolerate it. And I did cold therapy when I could tolerate it. So, and anybody that's got a migraine understands that when I could tolerate it part, because there's just sometimes you can't, you just don't have the strength. And you ask about other protocols. I did know about Shoemaker and I bought his book, the big textbook, and read what I could. I was trying to help somebody else at the time, and I was practicing some of the protocols that I saw of his. I was trying to do it on my own in a layman's way. So I was kind of taking what I learned from him and then putting it into my own little practice, trying to create something for this other person. And so I was practicing all these different things, these gut detoxes and these pulling the stuff out of you type things. And I got, first thing that happened is I got the flattest belly I've ever had in my life. That was fun. And but yeah, that's I never actually did a Shoemaker protocol, but I did all these things, reading his book and figuring out stuff that might work. So anyway, I did end up getting well, and just by the grace of God and a lot of good people reaching out and helping me.
I see in the notes here too that maybe you did some circadian therapy
Oh,
as well.
yes,
And
I
when
did.
did you start
Sorry.
that? Did you know about like how did you know about all this? I mean, I just learned about it and I feel like I should have learned about it a long time ago.
Dave Asprey had that blog I was telling you about that was on, he
Yeah.
had a
And he
blog.
had that
He
in
was
there
so good.
too.
Yeah,
I
he
really
used
need to
to
go follow this guy.
talk about way back then he would talk about the things that he was learning, and he had learned that so when he was flying from his job on the west coast to England every month, and he found that when he did yoga in the park barefoot when he got to England he didn't have jet lag, and he finally learned eventually. He didn't know why that worked, but it worked, and it ended up that it was the grounding that was giving it to him, and then being in the circadian the light. And so he that all anyway, he would talk about that in the blog. So I would go outside at sunrise with the migraines. I would go outside, and sometimes I would just sit, and but I go outside and at sunrise I still do. And I do it as, oh, that's something else too about accountability. I post still online. I do accountability because we need our community. So I on Sundays, if you follow me on Instagram, you will see every Sunday I do an accountability post. Here's how many steps I walked this week, and here is what I did. And then I used to do it with my food too, but people get too wrapped around the axle about food, and I don't want to have arguments. So I don't do that very often anymore. I still post recipes, but on every morning, I post my sunrise. I am out at sunrise. If it's rainy, if it's snowing, I live in New Hampshire, so sometimes there's 3 feet of snow on the ground. I am outside at sunrise, even if you can't see it. And but I'll have a picture of whatever I can find at sunrise to show you. So I still do that. Accountability matters. So if you're trying to figure out how to do something, start posting about it. Tell people what you're doing. Ask for help. It makes a
Amazing.
huge
So
difference.
how did you end up so you went from being in a chair, just really losing your muscle for years being sick, being kind of stuck, but you just continued to learn. You heal yourself, you become a Spartan racer, you become a certified senior fitness specialist,
Yeah.
and you just continue to just keep growing and helping. And then how did you end up working for Dr. Rimka? Because we love her.
Oh, who doesn't love Dr. Rimka? She is amazing. I'm just so thrilled. So actually, I started following Dr. Rimka when I was so sick. I found her online because she does, it's called Brain and Body Solutions. I needed help with my brain, but I couldn't afford her back then. I had to leave my job, couldn't afford her. And so I just followed what she said, and I'll follow her on Instagram. And so this is a fun story. I, when I did the Spartan, I told you I announced it to the world. And I guess Dr. Baker was around because and I was doing carnivore. Yeah, so he was around then. And so I don't know how he knew me, but he was following my journey of doing the Spartan race. So I was at a conference that he was speaking at, and I was just standing there in the crowd. And he saw me and he pointed at me and he said, "You're the lady that did the Spartan. Get up here." So I went up and we shook hands and we posed together and all these different stuff. And my husband's like, "How does this happen?" It's like, "'Cause I talk to people." So that was really fun. So a few months later, he and Dr. Rimko were talking, and she said, I'm needing some help with a class that I'm hosting, and I need somebody older woman that works out." And he says, "Oh, you need to follow Linda." So she contacted me and asked me if she could, and Dr. Rimka's contacting me, and I'm like, so it's like,
Contact me and I'm like,
fangirl. Yeah. I did that with Dr.
"Yes,
Baker. So I said, fangirl. So
yes."
she asked if she could send some people over to my page to get some advice or to watch me or whatever, if I would mind if she would do that. And I said, "No, please, that's fine." And so that was long before the masters. I was still just trying to figure out how to get well. I couldn't run yet. I couldn't run. I had still a lot of pain. I couldn't run. And I was trying to get to the place where I could run again. And so in the master's. So my alma mater offered this master's degree. I didn't know they had it. I have no idea if this was another God thing. It just fell in my lap one day. It's like this thing just showed up on I think it showed up on my computer. It's like, "Would you like to, we're offering these masters. Would you like to do one?" It's like, yes, I would. I did not ask. I did not slow down. I typed my name in there and signed up. And so I finished my master's last year in May 2023. And I did my internship for my master's with Dr. Remke, though. So I contacted her and said, I'm working on my master's. I have to internship with someone. Can I do that with you? And she said yes. And she had me. So I got to work with her and her team for a month, and that was fun. That was last year, April. And then a few months later, she asked if I would be willing to talk about becoming a health coach for her, which was another master's degree because it's like, if you know Dr. Rimka like I know her, she doesn't do anything halfway. Everything is really well done. And it's like learning through, what do you call that? Drinking through a fire hose. It's just the information and the learning curve. It's just, I love every day working with her. It's just wonderful.
Well, Linda, I love every day when we have conversations because I feel like you are a wealth of knowledge and you just fire hose me. And I love it because there's so much to learn. I mean, I feel like I watch content every single day to try to just keep learning, keep growing. There's still some things I have questions on that I'm hoping one day someone will say the answer to. So I really think anybody out there, they should definitely go follow you. And it's Linda's Living Well on Instagram,
Mhm.
correct? And
Right.
where's your blog? Or they just follow the link in your bio.
Yeah, the link in my bio will, I have an ebook in there, and I'm a manager for a skincare company that's also with Dr. Rimka. That's through Dr. Rimka too. And so, or following, whatever is connected with Dr. Rimka. So that's in there too, if you're interested in that. And then I do one-on-ones, and my blog is in there. So yeah, everything. And I do have a newsletter too that I send out. I used to be really good at being, uh, very timely with it, but my schedule's been a little crazy lately, so it's been a little more erratic. But I love to create recipes, and so when I have a new recipe, I put one in. Every newsletter has a free recipe in it. So I love that I can give back some way to these people. Everybody, I mean, like I said, so many people reached out to help me that I just feel like my purpose right now is just to do the same thing back. And so I answer all my DMs and I do the best I can. I'm not a doctor. I can share my experience, and I can connect you to people. Like if you're having an issue, I probably know somebody and can get you connected to them. So yeah.
Well, I so appreciate you telling your story. I know when I met you in Chicago, the Chicago meetup, that I was sitting here. I'm kind of frustrated right now. My body's been going woo, 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 and you just give me hope. You're just absolutely beautiful. It took time, and you just give me hope. So I really appreciate you sharing that story of hope with my viewers, and I appreciate your time. So again, anybody who would like to go follow Linda, it's Linda's Living Well, and thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome.
All
Thank you
right.
for
Well,
having
everyone, if you liked this episode, please like, subscribe, and share with all your friends. Have a great day.